Well, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what part of the globe you're on and what time zone you are in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, hey, hey. What a day. This is called the After Work After Show. I really don't know what this is anymore. But it's fun, dude. It's fun. I enjoy reading. And I know I've said it a million times and I'll say it again. Basically, starting a book on camera. I don't know where I got into it. I think it was back before I could get a hold of books that interest me, and then I found out, oh, people literally read these books online. Oh my. Where are these books? Where are these people that are reading these books? And then I suddenly discovered, you know, people who would read apologist books and books I would never find anywhere or maybe not even have an inclination to read, but these guys would read through the books. And yeah, that's how I got started. So I found that reading on camera, it kind of, I don't know, it kind of forces me to, now that I've started it, I have to finish it. It kind of keeps me what's the it kind of grounds me, keeps me on my toes, holds me accountable. That's the word I'm looking for. So now I have no choice. I must finish this book. I can't leave this book unfinished and halfway read. So we're gonna keep going. Another thing I've found that I enjoyed is, you know how you have famous, well, famous rock bands and famous stand-up comedians that you've grown up with or you've watched. Well, I've fallen down a rabbit hole where I'm literally watching people watch what I've watched for the very first time and react to it. Best thing to describe it is reaction vids, I guess. So I'm going to share one with you right now. I don't know. I enjoy it. Here's somebody watching George Carlin. So, I have to share it with everybody. So, let's see. Well, why don't we just make it bigger? Here we go. I don't know what channel this is. It's just a random channel. I don't even know if I don't think these people have even, I think this is like a first time viewing of George Carlin. Now, I've seen this stand up a couple of times, so I know what they're in for. Well, let's hear it.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, T. And welcome to the adventures of TT Comedy, which we're back doing some more George Carlin, in which the piece we're doing today is called Saving the Planet. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's see what he's talking about. Let's go.
See, I'm not one of these people who's worried about everything. You got people like this around you. Country's full of them now. People walking around all day long, every minute of the day, worried about everything. Worried about the air, worried about the water, worried about the soil. Worried about insecticides, pesticides, food additives, carcinogens. Worried about radon gas, worried about asbestos. Worried about saving endangered species. Let me tell you about endangered species, all right? Saving endangered species is just one more arrogant attempt by humans to control nature. It's arrogant meddling. It's what got us in trouble in the first place. Doesn't anybody understand that? Interfering with nature. Over 90%, way over 90% of all the species that have ever lived on this planet, are gone.
Yeah.
They're extinct. we didn't kill them all. They just disappeared. That's what nature does. They disappear these days at the rate of 25 a day. And I mean, regardless of our behavior, irrespective of how we act on this planet, 25 species that were here today will be gone tomorrow. Let them go gracefully. Leave nature alone. Haven't we done enough? We're so self-important. So self-important. Everybody's going to save something now.
Yeah.
Save the trees, save the bees, save the whales, save those snails. And the greatest arrogance of all, save the planet. What? Are these fucking people kidding me? Save the planet? We don't even know how to take care of ourselves yet. We haven't learned how to care for one another. We're going to save the fucking planet? I'm getting tired of that shit.
For goodness. Sorry, I'm not going to subject you to a commercial. Ugh.
I'm tired of fucking Earth Day. I'm tired of these self-righteous environmentalists, these white bourgeois liberals who think the only thing wrong with this country is there aren't enough bicycle paths. People trying to make the world safe for their Volvos. Besides, environmentalists don't give a shit about the planet. They don't care about the planet. Not in the abstract, they don't. Not in the abstract, they don't. You know what they're interested in? A clean place to live. Their own habitat. The word that someday in the future they might be personally inconvenienced. Narrow, unenlightened self-interest doesn't impress me. Besides, there is nothing wrong with the planet. Nothing wrong with the planet. The planet is fine. The people are fucked. Difference. Difference. The planet is fine. Compared to the people, the planet is doing great. We've been here 4.5 billion years. You ever think about the arithmetic? Planet has been here 4.5 billion years. We've been here, what, 100,000? Maybe 200,000. And we've only been engaged in heavy industry for a little over 200 years. 200 years versus 4.5 billion. And we have the conceit to think that somehow we're a threat, that somehow we're going to put in jeopardy this beautiful little blue-green ball that's just floating around the sun. The planet has been through a lot worse than us. Been through all kinds of things worse than us.
Wow.
Been through earthquakes, volcanoes, plate tectonics, continental drift, solar flares, sunspots, magnetic storms, the magnetic reversal of the poles.
So smart.
Hundreds of thousands of
So
years
smart.
of bombardment by comets and asteroids and meteors, worldwide floods, tidal waves, worldwide fires, erosion, cosmic rays, recurring ice ages, and we think some plastic bags and some aluminum cans are going to make a difference? The planet.
Wow.
Me
The
too. I just don't
planet
want to.
isn't going anywhere. We are. We're going away.
Wow.
Pack your shit, folks. We're going away. I won't leave much of a trace either. Thank God for that. Maybe a little styrofoam. Maybe. Little styrofoam. Planet will be here and we'll be long gone. Just another failed mutation. Just another closed end.
Oh, no.
Evolutionary cul-de-sac. The planet will shake us off like a bad case of fleas. A
Oh.
surface nuisance. You want to know how the planet's doing? Ask those people at Pompeii who are frozen into position.
Oh, no.
How the planet's doing.
Oh,
Well, the planet's all right.
Jesus
Ask those
Christ.
people in Mexico City or Armenia or 100 other places buried under thousands of tons of earthquake rubble if they feel like a threat to the planet this week.
Oh, my
How about those
God.
people in Kilauea, Hawaii, who build their homes right next to an active volcano and then wonder why they have lava in the living room? The planet will be here for a long, long, long time after we're gone, and it will heal itself. It will cleanse itself, because that's what it does. It's a self-correcting system. The air and the water will recover, the earth will be renewed, and if it's true that plastic is not degradable, well, the planet will simply incorporate plastic into a new paradigm, the earth plus plastic.
Wow.
The earth doesn't share our prejudice towards plastic. Plastic came out of the earth. The earth probably sees plastic as just another one of its children. Could be the only reason the Earth allowed us to be spawned from it in the first place. It wanted plastic for itself. Didn't know how to make it. Needed us. It could be the answer to our age-old philosophical question: why are we here? Plastic.
Look at his face.
Oh man.
The plastic is here. Our job is done. We can be phased out now. And I think that's where it started already, don't you? I mean, to be fair, the planet probably sees us as a mild threat, something to be dealt with. And I'm sure the planet will defend itself in the manner of a large organism, like a beehive or an ant colony can muster a defense. I'm sure the planet will think of something. What would you do if you were the planet trying to defend against this pesky, troublesome species? Let's see. What
New ice age.
Viruses.
Oh.
Viruses. They seem vulnerable to
Oh.
viruses. And viruses are tricky, always mutating and forming new strains whenever a vaccine.
What the fuck?
Oh. Well, there you have it, folks. I didn't even think of that.
When did this come out?
It looked like a long time ago.
A long time
It
ago.
looked like the early 90s. You want me to Google it?
No. We'll look it up afterwards. Oh my god.
Well, there you have
George
it.
Carlin predicted the future.
Yeah, but it was happening before even
Yeah.
this. You had the Spanish flu and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Swine flu, all these different viruses.
viruses.
Isn't it amazing that the Spanish flu is now part of the zeitgeist? It's part of it's what we think about now, because I mean, before coronavirus, the pandemic, I never heard of the 1918 pandemic of the Spanish flu. I didn't even realize how bad it was. It was pretty fucking bad. And it's just mind-boggling. And you hear Spanish flu, that's like common knowledge now. On the street, people, you say Spanish flu, and somebody's going to have some idea. They've either heard the phrase or they know exactly what you're talking about.
All right.
You know, plagues as well.
Plague.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is crazy. Let's go.
Is developed. Perhaps this first virus could be one that compromises the immune system of these creatures. Perhaps a human immunodeficiency virus, making them vulnerable to all sorts of other diseases and infections that might come along. And maybe it could be spread sexually, making them a little reluctant to engage in the act of reproduction.
Oh,
Well, that's a poetic note. And it's a start. And I can dream, can I? Don't worry about the little things. Bees, trees, whales, snails. I think we're part of a greater wisdom than we will ever understand. A higher order. Call it what you want. Know what I call it? The big electron. The big electron. Whoa. It doesn't punish. It doesn't judge at all. It just is. And so are we. For a little while. Thanks for being here with me for a little while.
Oh, wow.
Thank you very much.
That was amazing.
No comedian like him. I've never listened to a comedian
That makes you think.
that makes you think like this.
Yes, this was amazing. Very
Yeah.
insightful, very knowledgeable, and I love this because I love reading books
Yeah.
and documentaries.
Right. Especially space and science and stuff.
Yeah.
Because we watch a lot of videos, documentaries on space exploration and science.
Quantum physics
Yeah,
and
all
stuff
that
like
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
And this was just so insightful. It gave me that knowledge that I thirst for, but also
It's wrapped up in a funny package.
it's wrapped up in a funny package, but then it's like you laugh and it's like, ooh, this is it. This for real.
And there you have it. It's interesting. I like to see how different people react to certain things, how they react to, and they all come to the same conclusion. George Carlin was the man. Before the hitch slap, there was the George Carlin steamroller. I mean, that guy could bulldoze through anything. He gave two shits. He did not care. He did not care what you think. Actually, he did. There were people who actually met him on the street and talked to him. He wasn't always in character as you saw on the screen, but yeah. So there you have it. Reaction video number 1. Reaction to George Carlin. But yeah, every once in a while I'll play one of these reaction vids, and or it's interesting. I like to see how other people react to it. I even watching Christians watch George Carlin for the first time, and you just see their face as George Carlin just plows right through, any belief they have. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He just but anyway. So there you have it. George Carlin reaction video. Anyway, let's get to what we came here to do, and that's reading The Founding Myth, Andrew Seidel's Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. And we're going to go to chapter 16, Suppress Speech, the Third Commandment. And this book just gets better and better and better. It really does. I've enjoyed it so far. I hope you have too. Suppressed speech. Oops. All right. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Or thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Exodus 20 verse 7. George Orwell. If thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. Politics in the English Language Horizon, April 1946. That was short. That was, wow. That was close to his death. And I think he died in 47, 48. Call him Voldemort, Harry. Always use the proper name for things. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself. Albus Dumbledore in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, 1999. Yahweh apparently took the third commandment pretty seriously, for he refused to even tell the Israelites his name. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. In the more careful translations of the Bible, when the word Lord is written in small capitals, it is not a generic title, but a substitute translators developed to refer specifically to the Hebrew God Yahweh. Yahweh was represented by 4 Hebrew letters, YHWH. This is known as the tetragrammaton, from the Greek for having 4 letters. But given the taboo on using the name, the word Lord in small caps was substituted. The Israelites took this commandment as seriously as their God. According to the Bible, they stoned a half-Israelite to death for blaspheming during a fistfight. Let's see. During a fistfight. All right. Under the Jewish law, Jews could blaspheme heathen deities, but as that incident shows, heathens blaspheming the Jewish God were guilty of a capital crime. According to Jesus, breaking this commandment is the one unforgivable sin in the Bible. People will be forgiven their sins and whatever blasphemes they utter, but whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, but is guilty of eternal sin. And if a parent were to violate this commandment, Yahweh would kill their newborn child, as he did to David and Bathsheba. Thomas Aquinas could not decide whether blasphemy was worse than murder. His indecision is hard to understand because blasphemy is directed at an unassailable, omnipotent God, while murder harms a fellow human being in the most egregious way possible. In his Summa Theologica, Aquinas wrote, if we compare murder and blasphemy as regards the object of those sins, it is clear that blasphemy, which is a sin committed directly against God, is more grave than murder, which is a sin against one's neighbor. On the other hand, if we compare them in respect of the harm wrought by them, murder is the graver sin. For murder does more harm to one's neighbor than blasphemy does to God. Since, however, the gravity of a sin depends on the intention of the evil will rather than on the effect of the deed, it follows that as the blasphemer intends to do harm to God's honor, absolutely speaking, he sins more grievously than the murderer. Punishing crimes against the regime more harshly than crimes against other people is typical in totalitarian systems. But but are we sure that blasphemy is really the issue here? For a God, Yahweh's legislation is remarkably imprecise. Misusing or taking a name in vain is so vague as to mean nothing, yet somehow prohibits everything. In the United States, sloppy legal drafting is grounds for declaring a law unconstitutional. If citizens cannot know what is prohibited by a law, they cannot be expected to obey the law, and it can be struck down as too vague. Then again, vague laws that permit many interpretations are also typical in totalitarian regimes. This is actually one reason the founders carefully defined treason as a crime within the Constitution itself. Quote, if the description of treason be vague and indeterminate under any government, this alone will be a sufficient cause why the government should degenerate into tyranny, James Wilson explained to a grand jury in 1791. Treason, in any other crime, if poorly defined, furnishes an opportunity to unprincipled courtiers and to demagogues, equally unprincipled, to harass the independent citizen and the faithful subject by treasons and by prosecutions for treasons, constructive, capricious, and oppressive, added Wilson in a law lecture that same year. Some uncertainty in the law is unavoidable because language expresses the law. In an oblique jab at biblical literalism, James Madison pointed out in Federalist number 37 that even when Almighty himself condescends to address mankind in their own language, his meaning, luminous as it must be, is rendered dim and doubtful by the cloudy medium through which it is communicated. God's meaning is certainly dim and doubtful in the third commandment. So, what does this actually mean? Ambrose Bierce thought it was not an issue of language, but of timing. Take not God's name in vain. Select a time when it will have effect. A perfectly valid interpretation. Is this really just an issue of language? Suppose I say, God damn it, or mutter Jesus Christ in anger. Would I be violating this commandment, saying God damn it, or asking God to damn something so it has a purpose? The request is not in vain. And who says I'm asking Yahweh to do their damning? Maybe I'm asking it of Zeus or Thor. Good point. Is Jesus Christ uttered as an imprecation, even using God's name? The name Jesus Christ is made up of an English word followed by a Greek title. Jesus is the English translation of a Latin translation of a Greek translation of a Hebrew name. If Jesus did exist, he would have a Hebrew name, Yeshua. Yeshua is closer to our Joshua than to Jesus and was a remarkably common name at the time of Jesus' supposed virgin birth. The Hebrew Yeshua was translated into Greek and then into the Latin Jesus, then into English. Latin, the J is silent. I don't know how to pronounce it in Latin. Sorry. Appended to that thrice translated name is the title Christ, which comes from the Greek Christos, meaning anointed, someone daubed with oil. Christos is a translation of the Hebrew word Mashiach. Christ is not a name, but a title. It'd be better to translate the whole phrase into English, Jesus Messiah. Or better yet, revert to the original Hebrew. Jesus was Jewish and call him Yeshua Mashiach, ben Yosef, Jesus the Anointed One, the son of Joseph. If saying Jesus Christ doesn't violate the commandment, what about saying oh my God or texting OMG? What about the ubiquitous Jesus bumper stickers and the t-shirts? And given that there is no God to answer prayers, aren't all appeals to heaven in vain? To paraphrase Joseph Lewis, one of the greatest atheist activists of the last century, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Thou canst not use the name of God in any other way. I've never heard of Joseph Lewis. Okay. I don't have my notes. Well, anyway. The Due Process Clause of the 5th and 14th Amendment require laws to give adequate guidance to those who would be law-abiding, to advise defendants of the nature of the offense with they are charged, or to guide courts in trying those who are accused. Legislation violates those amendments if it fails to do so. Laws prohibiting loafering, wandering, or strolling, for instance, may be meant to curb loitering, but are too vague to explain what they actually prohibit and are often struck down. As a law, the third commandment would raise more questions than it answers. What constitutes a wrongful use of the name? Does it have to be the actual name, or will any mention of God suffice? What if you wrongfully use the name of somebody else's God? What does it mean to use a name in vain? Any law so vague would violate the U.S. Constitution. If the third commandment prohibits blasphemy, which is not at all clear, then it must be conceded that this commandment had some repressive and embarrassing influences on law in the United States and abroad, both before and after the founding. This is one of several negative Judeo-Christian principles that have influenced America since the founding, but by impeding progress. Nearly 35 years after the First Amendment was adopted, John Adams wrote to Thomas Jefferson questioning the American commitment to liberty because of blasphemy laws. We think ourselves possessed, or at least we boast that we are so, of liberty of conscience on all subjects, and of the right of free inquiry and private judgment in all cases. And yet, how far are we from those exalted privileges in fact? There exists, I believe, throughout the whole Christian world, a law which makes it blasphemy to deny or to doubt the divine inspiration of all the books of the Old and New Testaments, from Genesis to Revelation. In most countries of Europe, it is punished by fire at the stake or the rack or the wheel. In England itself, it is punished by boring through the tongue with a red-hot poker. In America, it is not much better, even in our Massachusetts. Now, what free inquiry when a writer must surely encounter the risk of fine or imprisonment for abducing any argument for investigation into the divine authority of those books? I think such laws a great embarrassment, great obstruction to the improvement of the human mind. Books that cannot bear examination certainly ought not to be established as divine inspiration by penal laws. How many times I've not thought about that. There were blasphemy laws on the books even way back then. And it brings to mind why the founding fathers were so secretive in their shared disdain of Christianity and Christian principles, because they could literally be charged. The founding fathers could be charged for blasphemy in their own country they helped to create. Think about that. Adams was certainly correct that blasphemy laws are embarrassments. They are obstructions to the human mind, and they stifle free inquiry. They retard progress and destroy societal well-being. Afghanistan, Egypt, Iran, Kuwait, Pakistan, and Yemen are some of the countries that actively enforce and brutally punish blasphemy today, including with whipping and execution. Raif Badawi was jailed in Saudi Arabia in June 2012 for insulting Islam and was sentenced to 10 years and 1,000 lashes. His wife, Insaf Haidar, and the children fled to Canada, and his attorney was arrested. The first 50 lashes meted out received international outcry, but as of this writing, Badawi remains in jail and under threat of another 950 strokes for peacefully speaking his mind. All these nations suffer under the iron hand of religion, but criticism of religion is the true beginning of freedom. Criticizing the system that claims to punish you for your thoughts is the first step against totalitarianism. Adams wrote the above condemnation in a letter to Jefferson, who had particular reason to loathe these statutes. Had they been enforced, Jefferson himself would have been prosecuted for taking a razor to the New Testament and cutting out all the supernatural nonsense, the virgin birth, the resurrection, the miracles. The man who drafted Virginia's statute on religious freedoms, on which his friend James Madison based our First Amendment, did not think such laws in keeping with liberty. And in 1814 letter, Jefferson attacked blasphemy laws. I am really mortified to be told that in the United States of America, a fact like this can become a subject of inquiry and of criminal inquiry too, as an offense against religion, that a question about the sale of a book can be carried before the civil magistrate. Is this then our freedom of religion? And are we to have a censor whose imprimatur shall say what books may be sold and what we may buy? And who is thus to dogmatize religious opinions for our citizens? Whose foot is to be the measure to which ours are all to be cut or stretched? Is a priest to be our inquisitor? Or shall a layman, simple as ourselves, set up his reason as the rule for what we are to read and what we must believe? It is an insult to our citizens to question whether they are rational beings or not, and blasphemy against religion to suppose it cannot stand the test of truth and reason. Think about that. Our founding fathers literally had to worry. They literally had to worry about being brought to court for blasphemy charges. And people wonder why they were not so open with their disdain of Christianity and Judeo-Christian principles. They literally had to hide it. And it just slips the mind. You just don't think about it because we don't deal with it today. American principles dictated a diversion from laws like the Third Commandment, laws that had been tried early in our history but were found too oppressive. This commandment runs afoul of the First Amendment several times over, violating the two religious clauses, the speech and the press clause. It is not the business of government in our nation to suppress real or imagined attacks upon a particular religious doctrine, said the Supreme Court in 1952. The Supreme Court has also noted that laws prohibiting sacrilegious speech raise substantial questions under the First Amendment's guarantee of separate church and state with freedom of worship for all. Given this history and the constitutional conflicts, any influence this commandment had was not positive. At best, it was a lighthouse that warned the founders away from regulating speech in the name of God. Robert Ingersoll mounted an eloquent attack on an archaic New Jersey blasphemy law in May 1877, defending Charles B. Reynolds, who had been charged under the law before a packed courtroom in Morristown. In 2018, Morristown and Morris County were the site of another watershed religious freedom case. The country was giving away millions of taxpayer dollars to churches so that they could repair their buildings and the active congregations could continue to worship. I litigated the case to the New Jersey Supreme Court, which agreed unanimously that that this violated state constitution. Citizens cannot be taxed to support religious worship. Reynolds had been a preacher, an itinerary Seventh-day Adventist. The ex-reverend moved from preaching about the Saturday Sabbath in a tent to lecturing on free thought in that tent. He aroused local ire with his free thinking and was eventually arrested and charged. Ingersoll attacked the law as counter to American principles. Blasphemy laws suppress intellectual liberty, and without that, we are poor, miserable serfs and slaves, he argued. Like Adams, Ingersoll observed that the ignorant bigots of this world have been trying for thousands of years to rule the minds of men by brute force. They have endeavored to improve the mind by torturing the flesh, to spread religion with the sword and the torch. The history of the New Jersey blasphemy law Ingersoll challenged is particularly interesting. It was passed before the Constitution was written and was not enforced until the 1877 case Ingersoll waded heroically into. Ingersoll expounded on the law's sad history. It was passed hundreds of years before by men who believed it was right to burn heretics and tie Quakers at the end of a cart, men and even modest women stripped naked and lash them from town to town. The statute has slept all this time. There never has been a prosecution in this state for blasphemy. New Jersey and its people become civilized, but that law was on the statute book. It simply remained. Nobody savage enough to awaken it, and it slept on. And New Jersey has flourished. Ingersoll thought the rationale underlying the law was ridiculous. He continues, did anybody ever dream of passing a law to protect Shakespeare from being laughed at? Did anybody ever think of such a thing? Did anybody ever want any legislative enactment to keep people from holding Robert Burns in contempt? The songs of Burns will be sung as long as there is love in the human heart. Do we need to protect him from ridicule by statute? Does he need assistance from New Jersey? Is any statute needed to keep the Euclid from being laughed at in its neighborhood? And is it possible that a work written by an infinite being has to be protected by a legislature? Is it possible that a book cannot be written by God so that it will not excite the laughter of the human race? The jury found Reynolds guilty of breaking a law that made it a crime to willfully blaspheme the holy name of God by denying, cursing, or contumeliously approaching his being, or by cursing or contumeliously reproaching Jesus Christ, or the Holy Ghost, or the Christian religion, or the Holy Word of God. The fine and costs amounted to about $75, which Ingersoll himself paid, a small price to expose and mortally cripple American blasphemy laws. Blasphemy laws and religious restrictions on speech are un-American. This commandment stands opposed to all that makes our country great. The American who values the Constitution and liberties it protects will stand with Adams, Jefferson, Madison, and as Ingersoll stated, deny the right of any man, of any number of men, of any church or state to put a padlock on the lips, to make the tongue a convict, and passionately deny the right of the Herod of authority to kill the children of the brain. Well, I'll tell you what, that chapter was amazing. Loved it. Loved it. Can you imagine if blasphemy laws existed today? What kind of a country would we be in? Can you imagine if this ended up becoming a Muslim-controlled country? What then? You have blasphemy laws that you have protected and ensured and supported and basically enforced. You now have precedent and you've enforced it. Now another religion has risen up and is in control of the country. What are you going to do then? blasphemy of any religious deity must be protected at all costs. I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten that. It never dawned on me that the founding fathers, George Washington, Madison, Monroe, Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, that old reprobate. Can you imagine if these guys had can you imagine the stories, how different they would be if they had come under censure of American law, or I guess pre-colonial law? You cannot blaspheme or even take the name of God in vain. Can you imagine them being charged under those laws? You don't even think of it. It's like you just it never occurs to you how different the story could have been. Phew. Well, with that, I say goodnight. Let's do this again. See you all later. Don't know exactly when, but it'll definitely be later when I do. Take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy.